Hello everyone. In today's video, I bring you a story that will challenge everything you believe about life, death, and what lies beyond. Let's get to know Evangeline Darrow, a woman who, after a complicated surgery, literally died on the operating table and came back with a shocking revelation that will move you deeply. What she discovered about what exists beyond all religions will leave you speechless. Before we begin, make sure to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss any videos like this one. Now prepare yourself for this spiritual and revealing journey, because what you're about to hear may change your view of life forever. My name is Evangeline Darrow, and I have a story to tell that completely changed my perception of life and death. First, let me tell you a little about who I was before this transformative experience. For 10 long years, I lived with constant pain in my knee, the result of a swimming accident that practically destroyed my joint. This pain wasn't just physical, it affected every aspect of my life. I was a woman in my early 30s, the mother of a lovely little girl named Lila, and I worked as a literature teacher at a local school. My life revolved around managing pain, taking care of my daughter, and trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. I had always been a pragmatic person, raised in a family with traditional religious beliefs, but I was never particularly devout. Life after death, spiritual experiences, all those things seemed distant from my daily reality. My focus was on surviving day by day, waiting for the moment when I could finally be free of the pain that tormented me. The knee surgery was something I had been waiting for months. It was my light at the end of the tunnel, the promise of a life without pain, of being able to run with my daughter in the park, of returning to the active person I used to be. I counted the days, imagining what it would be like to finally shed this burden I had been carrying for so long. Little did I know that this surgery would be the catalyst for an experience that would change not only my perception of physical pain, but of existence itself. What happened in that operating room and beyond it challenged everything I thought I knew about life, death, and what might exist between these two states. This is my story, an honest and detailed account of what I experienced during what doctors would call a near-death experience. But for me, it was much more than that. It was a journey to the core of existence, a glimpse of something greater than I could have ever imagined. In the next parts of this story, I will share with you every detail of this extraordinary experience, from the moments before the surgery to the lasting impact it had on my life. I ask that you keep an open mind as I tell my story. Even though it may seem unbelievable at times, I can assure you that every word is true, at least as far as my memory and perception allow me to recount. Prepare yourself for a journey that challenges the limits of what we consider possible and makes us question the very nature of reality. The day of my surgery arrived with a mix of anxiety and hope. I woke up early, long before the alarm went off. The sky was still dark, and the silence of dawn seemed to amplify my thoughts and worries. I went through my morning routine mechanically, taking a quick shower and putting on the comfortable clothes I had laid out the night before. Lila was still asleep when I left her room after giving her a soft kiss on the forehead. My sister would come later to take care of her while I was at the hospital. Looking at my daughter's serene face, I felt a pang of fear. What if something went wrong? I quickly pushed that thought away. Everything would be fine, I kept telling myself. On the way to the hospital, I watched the city wake up. The streets were still calm, with only a few cars circulating and some hurried people heading to work. The day was breaking, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and orange. For a moment, I was awed by the beauty of the sunrise, as if it were the first time I had ever seen it. Arriving at the hospital, I was greeted by a kind nurse who guided me through the admission process. The characteristic smell of antiseptic and the muffled sound of voices and medical equipment filled the air. As I filled out forms and answered routine questions, I felt a growing unease. That's when I met Dr. Nathan Whitmore, the surgeon who would perform the procedure. He had a reassuring smile and gentle eyes that seemed to convey confidence. He once again explained the details of the surgery, the risks, and what I could expect during recovery. His words were clear and comforting. but something inside me remained unsettled. Lying on the gurney, waiting to be taken to the operating room, I looked out the window and saw a bird perched on the windowsill. For some reason, that sight touched me deeply. It was as if that little creature was there to tell me something, though I didn't know what. When they finally wheeled me into the operating room, the reality of what was about to happen hit me full force. The bright lights, the coldness of the room, the sounds of the equipment, everything seemed intensified. The medical team moved around me, preparing everything for the procedure. The anesthesiologist approached, explaining what he was going to do. As he administered the anesthesia, I felt the world around me start to dissolve. The last thing I remember was looking up at the white ceiling and hearing Dr. Whitmore's distant voice giving instructions to his team, and then everything went dark. What happened next is something I still struggle to describe in words. It's like trying to explain colors to someone who has never seen them, or sound to someone who has never heard. But I'll do my best to share this extraordinary experience. The first thing I noticed was a deep, absolute silence. It wasn't the usual silence we experience in daily life, with faint background noises. It was a silence that seemed to swallow everything, even my own thoughts. Then, I opened my eyes. Or at least, that's what it felt like. But what I saw wasn't the operating room. I was floating above my own body. Down below, I could see Dr. Whitmore and his team working frantically. Their voices were muffled, as if they were far away. I looked at my body on the operating table, and it was a surreal feeling. It was me, but at the same time, it wasn't. It was like looking at an empty shell, a casing I had left behind. I tried to get their attention, to shout, to make some sort of sign, but it was as if I didn't exist in that plane. My hands, or what I perceived as my hands, passed through solid objects. I had no weight. I didn't feel cold or heat. It was a sensation of absolute freedom. Suddenly, I felt a force pulling me. It was gentle, but irresistible. I was drawn away from the operating room, through corridors and walls as if they didn't exist. The speed increased, and the hospital was left behind in seconds. I found myself immersed in a deep darkness. It wasn't frightening, but vast and infinite. For a brief moment, I felt fear. Where was I? What was happening to me? Had I died? Then, in the middle of that infinite darkness, I saw a point of light. It was tiny at first, like a distant star, but as I focused on it, the light grew. It was as if it was calling me, pulling me in. The light expanded, grew brighter, more welcoming. As I got closer to the light, I was overwhelmed by an indescribable feeling of peace and love. It was a love that transcended anything I had ever experienced on earth. It was unconditional, pure, absolute. All the pain, fear, worry, and anxiety I had carried simply dissolved. I felt whole, perfect, loved in a way I never thought possible. The light enveloped me completely, and in that moment I knew for sure that I was home. It was as if I had always belonged to this place, and everything I had lived on earth was just a distant dream. Within the light, I began to have glimpses of universal knowledge. It was as if all the knowledge of the universe was available to me, and I only had to wish to know something. I understood the interconnectedness of all things, the beauty and purpose behind every experience, even the painful ones. In this state of expanded consciousness, I realized that time didn't exist as we know it. Past, present, and future seemed to coexist. I could see events from my life, not only from the past but also glimpses of what the future might hold. It was in this moment of cosmic understanding that I realized my journey was just beginning. There was more for me, something I needed to do, and that's when I encountered the monks. As the light began to fade, I found myself in a place I can only describe as an infinite corridor. The walls, if I can even call them that, seemed to be made of an ethereal, almost translucent substance. There was no defined ceiling or floor. It felt as though I was floating in a space that stretched in all directions. Along this corridor, I saw figures resembling monks. They wore long robes of a deep brown, with hoods partially covering their faces. They stood in 2 rows, one on each side of the corridor, stretching as far as my vision could reach. The most fascinating thing was that, although I couldn't clearly see their faces, I felt they could see me. More than that, they understood me in a way no one had ever understood me before. It was as if they could see through me, knowing every thought, every emotion, every experience I had ever had. As I walked through the corridor, I realized that something extraordinary was happening inside me. It was as if each monk I passed was performing a deep healing on my being. Emotional wounds I had carried for years, some of which I didn't even know existed, began to heal. Painful memories from my childhood, traumas I had buried deep in my mind, fears, and insecurities that tormented me, all of these began to dissolve. It was as though each monk was removing a layer of pain, leaving only love and understanding in its place. I particularly noticed that many of these wounds were related to male figures in my life. An absent father, past relationships that had hurt me, experiences of rejection and abandonment. As I passed the monks, I felt these wounds being healed, not through forgetting, but through deep understanding and forgiveness. The most surprising thing was that I not only felt this healing happening, but I also understood the purpose behind every painful experience I had lived through. I realized that each challenge, each pain, each disappointment had shaped me, preparing me for something greater. At the end of the corridor, one of the monks stood out. Though his face was partially covered by the hood, I could sense an aura of wisdom and compassion emanating from him. When he spoke, his voice was soft and warm, resonating not only in my ears but in my entire being. "It is not your time," he said with infinite gentleness. "You have to go back." These words struck me with unexpected force. Go back. I had found peace, healing, understanding. How could I leave all of this behind? The thought of returning to pain, to the limitations of the physical world, filled me with sadness and reluctance. As if reading my thoughts, the monk continued, "Your daughter needs you. Your mission on earth is not over yet." In that moment, an image of Lila appeared in my mind. My sweet girl, so young, so full of life and potential. The thought of leaving her alone in the world broke my heart. And then, I understood that my journey on earth still had an important purpose to fulfill. With this understanding, I felt a mix of acceptance and determination. I would return, not just for Lila, but because I now had a new understanding of life, a greater purpose to fulfill. The monk smiled, as if approving my decision. "Remember," he said, "the love you experienced here is always with you. Take it back and share it with the world." With those words, I felt the corridor and the monks begin to fade. It was time to return. Before leaving that extraordinary place, I experienced what I can only describe as a great revelation. It was as if all the pieces of a cosmic puzzle finally came together, revealing an image of indescribable beauty and complexity. The love that emanated from the monks, the peace that filled that space made me understand something I had never imagined before. The divine force, what many call God, was not limited by the traditional religions I knew. It was something much greater, much more encompassing. At that moment, I realized that all religions, all spiritual beliefs, were merely different paths leading to the same universal truth. It didn't matter if someone was Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, or a follower of any other faith. Divine love was present in all these traditions, manifesting in grand and often unexpected ways. Harisi, who had been raised in a family with specific religious beliefs, now saw that the truth was far greater than any doctrine could contain. Those monks didn't belong to any church or temple I knew of on earth, but they were directly connected to the divine force. This revelation made me question everything I thought I knew about spirituality and religion. I realized that many of the conflicts and divisions that exist in the world are based on misunderstandings and limited interpretations of this universal truth. If everyone could experience what I was experiencing at that moment, how much peace and understanding could be achieved. I also understood that life, as we know it on earth, is only a small part of a much larger journey. Our earthly experiences, with all their joys and pains, are opportunities for growth and learning. Every challenge, every relationship, every moment of happiness or sadness has a greater purpose in the grand scheme of things. Death, which had once seemed to me a frightening and definitive end, now revealed itself as a transition, a return to our true spiritual home. The fear of death completely dissipated, replaced by a deep understanding that we are eternal beings, always loved and always connected to the divine source. This revelation brought with it a responsibility. I understood that, by returning to earthly life, I would have the mission to share this knowledge, not necessarily through words, but through actions and the unconditional love I had experienced. As I absorbed all these truths, I felt immense gratitude for having received this glimpse of the divine. At the same time, I felt a pang of sadness at having to leave that state of total understanding and return to the physical world, with all its limitations. However, the monk who had spoken to me earlier seemed to sense my hesitation. His voice, gentle and comforting, echoed once again. Remember, Evangeline, what you experienced here is not separate from the world to which you will return. It is present in every moment, in every person, in every breath. Your task is to recognize and cultivate this divine presence in your everyday life. With these words, I felt a wave of determination envelop me. I would return, yes, but I would no longer be the same person. I would carry with me this new understanding, this connection to the divine, and do my best to live according to this greater truth. As this resolution solidified within me, I felt the world around me begin to change once again. The bright light began to dim, and the monks in the corridor began to fade. It was time to return. The process of returning to my physical body was an experience in itself, as intense as the journey I had just lived. As the light and the monks disappeared, I felt myself being pulled back, as if falling in slow motion through layer after layer of reality. During this fall, I had quick, intense flashes of memories, some from my current life, others that seemed to come from past lives or even possible futures. It was as though the entire fabric of time and space was unfolding before me, showing the interconnectedness of all things. As I approached the physical plane, I began to feel the sensations of my body again. It was a shock after the lightness and freedom I had experienced, the weight of my limbs, the rhythm of my breathing, even the pain in my knee. Everything seemed intensified and, in some way, strange. Slowly, I began to hear sounds around me. At first near Cairn, they were muffled and distant, as if they were coming from underwater. Gradually, they became clearer, the constant beeping of machines, muffled voices, the sound of footsteps in the hospital corridor. Opening my eyes was a challenge. My eyelids felt heavy, reluctant to part. When I finally managed to, the fluorescent ceiling light momentarily blinded me. I blinked several times, trying to focus my vision. The first person I saw was a nurse. She was checking my vital signs, and when she noticed I was awake, she smiled kindly. "Welcome back, Mrs. Darrow," she said. "The surgery was a success. How are you feeling?" I wanted to respond, to tell her about the incredible journey I had experienced, but my throat was dry, and my voice wouldn't come out. The nurse must have noticed my discomfort because she soon offered me some water. As I drank the water, I tried to organize my thoughts. How could I begin to explain what had happened? Would anyone believe me? More importantly, would I believe it myself once the fog of anesthesia completely cleared? In the days that followed, I remained under observation at the hospital. The pain in my knee was present, but somehow, it seemed less important now. My mind was occupied with processing everything I had experienced. I received visitors, my sister, a few friends, and of course, my dear Lila. Seeing her walk into the hospital room, with her bright eyes and innocent smile, filled me with an emotion I can't describe. Now I fully understood why I had to return. Dr. Whitmore also came to see me. He seemed pleased with the outcome of the surgery, but there was something in his eyes, a curiosity or perhaps a concern that intrigued me. Later, I would find out why. As the days passed and my discharge approached, I began to realize that something fundamental had changed within me. It wasn't just the spiritual understanding I had gained, but something more tangible, more immediate. I was starting to feel the emotions of those around me in a way I had never experienced before. It was as if I could see beyond words and facial expressions, directly into the hearts of people. Their joys, fears, hopes, and pains. I could feel all of it as if it were my own. This new sensitivity was both a gift and a challenge. I knew I would have to learn how to deal with it, to use it responsibly. But more than that, I knew that this was part of the mission entrusted to me when I decided to return. When I finally left the hospital, I wasn't just a woman who had undergone a successful surgery. I was someone who had died and been reborn, not only in the physical sense, but in the spiritual. And now, my true journey was only beginning. The days following my discharge from the hospital were a period of adjustment and discovery. Returning home to my daily routine was surprisingly challenging. The world I knew seemed the same, but my perception of it had changed dramatically. The first thing I noticed was an intensification of my empathy. It wasn't just an intellectual understanding of others' feelings, but a visceral experience. During a dinner with my sister, when she mentioned a pain in her arm, I could literally feel a twinge in my own arm. It was disconcerting, and I admit, a bit frightening at first. This new sensitivity wasn't limited to physical sensations. I could perceive the emotions of those around me with surprising clarity. It was as if every person emitted an emotional aura that I could instinctively read. The hidden sadness behind a stranger's smile on the street, the anxiety masked by a coworker's confidence. Everything became evident to me. At first, I tried to ignore these sensations, convincing myself it was just my imagination working overtime after the traumatic experience of surgery. But as the days passed, it became clear that this new perception was real and permanent. It was during this period of confusion and adjustment that I met Sister Cecilia. She was a nun who worked as a chaplain at the hospital where I had my surgery. I met her by chance, or was it fate, during one of my follow-up appointments. Sister Cecilia was unlike any religious person I had ever met. There was a light in her eyes, a peace in her presence that reminded me of the monks I had encountered during my near-death experience. When we introduced ourselves, I immediately felt that she could see beyond my words, directly into the deep change that had occurred within me. It was with her that I felt comfortable enough to share, for the first time, the details of my experience. To my surprise and relief, she showed no skepticism or judgment. On the contrary, she listened with compassionate attention, and when I finished, she smiled gently. "Evangeline," she said, "what you experienced is a precious gift. Many spend their entire lives searching for the kind of understanding that has been granted to you. But with this gift comes great responsibility." Sister Cecilia helped me understand that I had brought something back from that experience beyond just the memory. The new gifts of empathy and perception I was experiencing were real, and they had a purpose. She taught me techniques to manage this new sensitivity, so I wouldn't be overwhelmed by others' emotions. More importantly, she helped me see that these abilities were not a burden, but an opportunity to help others in a unique and profound way. "You have the ability to see beyond the surface, Evangeline," she told me. "Use it to bring healing and understanding where it is needed." With Sister Cecilia's guidance, I began to explore ways to use my new gifts. I started small, offering a word of comfort here, a listening ear there. I was surprised by the impact even the smallest gestures could have when they came from a place of true, deep understanding. Gradually, I gained confidence. I began offering informal counseling sessions to friends and acquaintances. People seemed to naturally gravitate toward me, as if they could sense I had something special to offer. It was during this time that I realized my purpose had fundamentally changed. Teaching literature was still important to me, but now I saw it as just one part of a larger mission. My true calling was to use my experience and new gifts to help people connect with their own spirituality, to find peace and healing in their lives. This new purpose brought a sense of fulfillment I had never experienced before. Every person I helped, every smile I could bring to a sad face, every heavy heart I could lighten a little, it all reaffirmed that my return had profound meaning. However, with this new mission came new challenges. Not everyone was ready to accept the kind of help I could offer. Some people were uncomfortable with my ability to read their emotions. Others simply didn't believe in the origin of my abilities. But for every skeptic, there were many others who found comfort and hope through my work. And it was through these encounters, these deep connections with other human beings, that I truly began to understand the meaning of that divine light I had experienced. My journey was only beginning, but now I had a clear purpose, a direction, and with each step I took on this new path, I felt that I was honoring the second chance I had been given. A few weeks after my discharge from the hospital, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from Dr. Nathan Whitmore's secretary, the surgeon who had performed my operation. She informed me that the doctor wanted to see me for a follow-up consultation outside of the normal schedule. I found it strange, but scheduled the appointment for the next day. When I entered Dr. Whitmore's office, I immediately sensed that something was different. The confident and assured doctor I knew seemed agitated, almost nervous. His eyes, usually focused and direct, now appeared distant, as if he were lost in thought. "Mrs. Darrow," he began after we exchanged initial greetings. "How have you been feeling since the surgery?" I responded that I was recovering well and that the pain in my knee had significantly decreased. But before I could elaborate, I noticed a wave of anxiety emanating from him. My newfound sensitivity allowed me to perceive that there was something more behind this seemingly simple question. "Dr. Whitmore," I said gently, "it seems like something is bothering you. May I ask what's going on?" He looked at me, surprised by my perception. There was a moment of hesitation before he finally spoke. "Mrs. Darrow, during your surgery, something happened that I can't explain." The doctor paused, as if he were carefully choosing his next words. "I'm a man of science, always have been. I believe in what I can see, touch, measure. But during your operation, I witnessed something that defies everything I learned in medical school." My heart raced. Could he have sensed something during my near-death experience? "For a few moments," he continued, "your vital signs, well, they simply stopped. No heartbeat, no detectable brain activity. By all medical standards, you were clinically dead." He paused again, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "We did everything we could to resuscitate you, but nothing was working. And then, suddenly, without any intervention from us, your vital signs returned. It was as if you had decided to come back on your own." I remained silent for a moment, absorbing his words. Then, gently, I asked, "And this is what's been troubling you, isn't it?" Dr. Whitmore nodded. "I can't stop thinking about it, but it's like there's something more at play beyond medicine." At that moment, I felt a deep compassion for Dr. Whitmore. I could feel his internal struggle, the conflict between his scientific training and what he had witnessed. I decided that he deserved to know the truth. "Dr. Whitmore," I began, "what I'm about to tell you may seem unbelievable, but I ask that you listen with an open mind." And then, I shared my near-death experience with him. I spoke about the light, the monks, the feeling of unconditional love, and the deeper understanding I had gained. As I spoke, I saw a range of emotions cross the doctor's face: disbelief, confusion, and finally, a kind of relief mixed with reverent awe. When I finished, Dr. Whitmore remained silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "Mrs. Darrow, I don't know what to think about all of this. It goes against everything I've learned, everything I've believed, but I can't deny what I saw in the operating room, and I can't ignore the changes I've been observing since then." I realized that my story had planted a seed of doubt in him, not a destructive doubt, but one that could open the way to a broader understanding. "Doctor," I said, "science and spirituality don't have to be mutually exclusive. Perhaps there's more to the universe than we can measure with our current instruments. Perhaps there's a point where science and spirit meet." "Doctor," Whitmore looked at me with a new light in his eyes. "Mrs. Darrow, you've given me a lot to think about. I don't know where this will lead me, but thank you for sharing your experience with me." As I left the office that day, I felt that something important had happened. Dr. Whitmore, a man of science, was now questioning his worldview. And I realized that part of my new purpose might be just that, helping to build bridges between the physical and spiritual worlds. In the months that followed, Dr. Whitmore and I kept in touch. He began taking an interest in studies about near-death experiences and incorporating more holistic practices into his treatments. I saw in him a gradual transformation, an openness to possibilities he would have previously dismissed. This experience with Dr. Whitmore showed me that my journey didn't just affect me, but had the potential to touch and transform the lives of many others. Every person I encountered, every story I shared, was an opportunity to expand the world's understanding of the connection between body, mind, and spirit. As time went on, I adapted more and more to my new reality. The near-death experience had profoundly transformed me, and now I was learning how to live with that transformation in everyday life. My physical recovery progressed well. The knee pain that had once dominated my life now seemed insignificant compared to the internal changes I had experienced. Still, I rigorously followed the physical therapy program, viewing each exercise as an opportunity to reconnect with my physical body and honor the second chance I had been given. However, the true healing journey was happening on a deeper level. With Sister Cecilia's guidance, I began exploring ways to integrate my spiritual experience into my daily life. She introduced me to meditation and mindfulness practices, which helped me maintain a connection to that sense of peace and unconditional love I had experienced during my journey beyond life. I also began actively working with my new gifts of empathy and perception. At first, it was overwhelming to feel others' emotions so intensely. There were days when I could barely leave the house, burdened by the emotional weight of the world around me. But slowly, I learned to set healthy boundaries, to filter what I absorbed, and to use this sensitivity constructively. I started offering informal counseling sessions to people going through difficult times. I didn't present myself as a professional counselor or healer, but simply as someone who could offer a compassionate ear and a unique perspective. I was surprised by how many people were drawn to me, as if they could sense that I had something special to offer. One of the most profound experiences I had was with a young woman named Sarah. She came to me, struggling with deep depression after the loss of her brother. When we sat together, I could feel the crushing weight of her pain, but I could also see beyond that, to the light still shining within her, even if she couldn't see it herself. During our conversations, I shared with Sarah some glimpses of what I had experienced during my journey. I spoke about the interconnectedness of all souls, about how love transcends the barrier between life and death. I didn't try to diminish her pain or tell her to move on, but offered a perspective that might bring her some comfort. Over the course of several weeks, I saw a gradual change in Sarah. The pain was still there, but now there was also a spark of hope. She began talking about how she felt her brother's presence sometimes, not in a frightening way, but in a comforting one. Seeing Sarah find a path to healing was incredibly rewarding and showed me the true power of what I had brought back with me. My own daughter, Lila, also played a crucial role in my healing and adaptation journey. Children have an incredible capacity to accept the extraordinary, and Lila was no exception. When I shared a simplified version of my experience with her, she accepted it with surprising ease. "Mommy went to visit the angels," was how she explained it to her friends with an innocent smile. Her unconditional acceptance and pure love were a constant reminder of what truly mattered in life. At work, I decided to be open about my experience with my colleagues and students. Surprisingly, I encountered more acceptance than skepticism. Many of my students were fascinated, and our classroom discussions gained new depth. I began incorporating themes of spirituality and expanded consciousness into my literature classes, showing how great authors throughout history had explored similar questions. Of course, not everything was easy. There were people who doubted me, who labeled me as strange or disturbed. Some friends distanced themselves, uncomfortable with my new perspective on life. These rejections hurt, but I saw them as part of the process of growth and transformation. One of the most important lessons I learned during this period was about forgiveness. I realized that I carried old resentments, mainly related to male figures from my past, my absent father, ex-partners who had hurt me. The experience with the monks had initiated a healing process, but now it was my responsibility to continue that work. Through much self-examination and reflection, I began to release these resentments. Not because the actions that hurt me were acceptable, but because I understood that holding on to this negativity was only harming me. Forgiveness, I discovered, was not so much for the other person, but for myself. As I progressed on this journey of overcoming and healing, I felt increasingly aligned with my true self. The physical pain in my knee, although still present at times, became a reminder of the incredible journey I had experienced. Every step I took, every person I helped, every moment of deep connection with the divine was an affirmation of the purpose for which I had returned. And so, day by day, I continued my journey, no longer just as Evangeline Darrow, the literature teacher with a bad knee, but as someone who had touched the divine and returned to share that light with the world. Now, looking back at everything I've lived and learned, I see life in a completely different way. The near-death experience wasn't just an isolated event, but a turning point that completely redefined my understanding of existence. I realized that life, as we know it here on Earth, is just a small part of a much larger journey. It's as if we are in a school, with each experience, each relationship, each challenge being a lesson designed for our spiritual growth and evolution. Pain, which I once saw as something purely negative, I now understand as a valuable teacher. My own journey with physical pain led me to deep transformation. Not that I seek suffering, but I've learned not to fear it or resent it when it appears. Instead, I look for the lesson, the growth that can come through it. Relationships have taken on new meaning for me. Every person I encounter, whether for a moment or a lifetime, is an opportunity for connection, exchange, and mutual growth. Even difficult or painful interactions are seen as chances to practice the unconditional love I experienced during my journey beyond life. Death, which once terrified me, is now seen with a new perspective. It's not the end, but a transition, a return to our true spiritual home. That doesn't mean I don't feel sadness when I lose a loved one. Longing and mourning are natural and important parts of the human experience. But now there's an underlying comfort, an understanding that separation is temporary, and that love transcends the barriers between worlds. My understanding of God or the divine force has also changed dramatically. It's no longer a distant, judgmental entity, but a loving and omnipresent presence. I see the divine in everything and everyone, in nature, in the eyes of a stranger, in the laughter of a child. This perception brings a constant sense of reverence and gratitude for life in all its forms. Spirituality, for me, is no longer about following a specific set of rules or dogmas, but about living in alignment with this broader understanding. It's about practicing love, compassion, and forgiveness in every moment. It's about recognizing our fundamental interconnectedness with all beings and acting from that awareness. Time has also gained a new dimension in my understanding. While I still live in the linear world of past, present, and future, I have moments of connection with a broader perspective, where everything exists simultaneously. This reminds me to live fully in the present, knowing that every moment is precious and full of potential. My purpose in life has become clear: to share the love and light I experienced, to help others awaken to their own divine nature. This doesn't mean preaching or trying to convert people to a specific belief. Instead, It's about living in a way that inspires others, that makes them question and seek their own deeper truths. However, this doesn't mean I have all the answers or that my life is perfect. I still face challenges, still make mistakes, still have moments of doubt and fear. But now I see these experiences as part of the rich tapestry of life, each offering its own opportunity for growth and learning. One of the most profound lessons I've learned is about the nature of love. The love I experienced during my journey was not conditional or limited. It was vast, infinite, encompassing everything. Now, I see one of my greatest challenges and opportunities is to bring that kind of love into my daily life. It's not always easy, especially in the face of conflicts or challenges, but it's an ideal I constantly strive for. Another important realization was understanding that our spiritual journey is unique and personal. What I experienced and learned may not be exactly what someone else needs to hear or experience. That's why I've learned to share my story with humility, respecting the path of each individual. Science, which I once saw as something separate from spirituality, now seems intimately connected to me. I see science as our attempt to understand and describe the mechanisms by which the universe operates. Spirituality, on the other hand, helps us understand the meaning and purpose behind these mechanisms. Both are valuable tools in our quest for understanding and growth. My experience also changed my perspective on time and eternity. While I still live in the linear world of chronological time, I have moments of connection with a reality where past, present, and future coexist. This reminds me to live each moment fully, knowing that it is eternal in its own way. As I move forward on my journey, I continue to learn and grow. Each day brings new discoveries, new challenges, and new opportunities to practice what I've learned. Sometimes, I find myself longing for that sense of peace and unconditional love I experienced during my journey beyond life. But then I remember that the purpose isn't to escape this world, but to bring some of that light and love into our everyday reality. I no longer fear death. In fact, I see it as an old friend, a portal to our true home. That doesn't mean I don't value my earthly life. On the contrary, it makes me appreciate every moment, every breath, every interaction even more. When I think about the future, I don't worry so much about material achievements or status. My focus is on how I can grow spiritually, how I can be a better instrument for divine love, how I can help more people awaken to their own divine nature. I know many people may find my story hard to believe or understand, and that's okay. I'm not here to convince anyone or prove anything. I'm here to live my truth, to share the love and light I experienced, and to help those who are ready for a different perspective on life and death. In the end, what I've learned can be summed up in a few simple yet profound words. We are all one. We are all unconditionally loved. Life is eternal. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. As I continue my journey in this life, I carry these truths with me. They guide me, comfort me, and inspire me. And my hope is that by sharing my story and living in accordance with these truths, I can somehow help bring a little more light and love into this world. Because, in the end, that's what our journey is about. It's not about reaching perfection or escaping the challenges of life. It's about growing, loving, learning, and, above all, remembering who we truly are. Eternal, divine beings united in a cosmic dance of love and light. And so, I conclude my story. But in truth, it's only the beginning. Each day is a new opportunity to live these truths, to grow, to love. And I am deeply grateful for every moment of this incredible journey we call life. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment your thoughts, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch every new video and help us spread this message to as many people as possible. See you next time.